Okay. Well, I think we can get started. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Sam Haas. I work for a company called GBSM. We are a strategic communications firm, and I will be helping out with facilitation of this meeting so that council members present and any city leaders here may just observe and be experts in the discussion. But so I will be helping out and presenting the information tonight. I do want to first allow any council members who are present to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Sandoval. I represent District 1 in Northwest Denver, and I am the chair. I've been chairing the redistricting process for the 2022. So thank you all for joining us this evening. This is an important discussion, so I'm honored to be here with you all.
Thank you. Also, my name is Kevin Flynn. I represent Southwest Denver's District 2, and I am also a map geek, and I really enjoyed this exercise that has to be done every 10 years to assure adequate and equal representation. And thank you to Councilwoman Sandoval and Councilman Herndon and others who have worked on organizing this effort on behalf of the whole body. Much appreciated.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Council President Stacy Gilmore, and I represent District 11, the far northeast. It's the majority of the Montbello and Green Valley Ranch communities, and honored to be here, and want to also thank the council members who have been involved. And we also want to recognize Councilwoman Black as being part of that team with Councilmember Herndon and the leadership of Councilmember Sandoval.
Thank you. I'm Kendra Black. I represent District 4 in Southeast Denver, and it's been a pleasure working on this effort. And thanks to Councilwoman Sandoval for taking this on early on and making sure that we were organized and prepared. And I also want to thank Emily Lapel, our legislative analyst, who has worked very, very hard on this. And also Sam Haas, who we met earlier because she's hosting the meeting. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Catchman. I represent District 6 in South Denver. Just want to thank everybody for being here tonight for an important discussion.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Herndon, District 8, Northeast Denver, the Vice Chair of the Redistricting Committee. Thank you, as everyone else has echoed, for being a part of this, all those who have worked to make this day happen for all of you, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
My name is Chris Hines. I serve on Denver City Council's District 10, or Denver's Perfect 10. It is basically the heart of Denver. Colorado, Colfax, and Spear are the boundaries, and the statistical neighborhood of North Capitol Hill, also known as Uptown. So thank you, as everyone else has said, thank you all for being here tonight.
Hi, everyone. It's Deborah Ortega. I'm one of the at-large members, and I wanted to just take a moment to also thank Doug Ginsler and Kathy from our IT department, as well as Brylan and Jonathan from our Department of Law, who have helped us make sure that we're following all the federal guidelines. So to everyone that's already been named, thank you as well, and look forward to hearing from the public on this. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? I think I saw a couple people join. Any other council members present? Okay, great. So next, I would just like to introduce Emily Lapel. So she is City Council's legislative policy analyst, and she'll be helping out with some of the technical knowledge. If Emily, do you mind just introducing yourself really quick?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Emily Lapel. I work for Central Staff in City Council. So I work for all 13 council members and their staff. It's been a joy to be a part of this process, and I'm here just to provide any additional background information, as well as take notes on your feedback for the maps that we have for you tonight. Thanks.
Great, thanks. And we do also just wanted to note we have a few GIS folks on the line to help out with any technical map questions. So Doug and Molly are here to help out with that. And finally, I would like, tonight's meeting is being interpreted into Spanish. B, would you please introduce yourself and let other viewers know how to enable translation on their devices?
Good evening, everybody. My name is B. Torres. I'm with the Community Language Cooperative. I want to thank the organizers of the event for their commitment to language justice. Once I finish speaking, I will repeat myself in Spanish and we will turn on the interpretation function. At that time, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Please click on that icon to select your language, English or Spanish. And if you're choosing Spanish, please be sure to mute original audio so you only hear your language being spoken. I want to remind everybody to speak at a conversational pace so that I can provide an accurate rendition of your message. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy Víctor, soy su intérprete con la Cooperativa Comunitaria del Lenguaje. Quiero agradecer a los organizadores de este evento por su compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje. En cuanto yo termine de hablar, prenderemos la función de interpretación y en ese momento ustedes verán un icono de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Favor de presionar ese icono y elijan su idioma de su corazón, sea inglés o español. Si eligen español, asegúrense de apagar el audio original para solo oír mi voz interpretando al español. Asegúrense de hablar en una voz a ritmo conversacional para yo poder dar una interpretación precisa de su mensaje. Favor de escribir cualquier duda o problema con interpretación en el chat y haré todo lo posible para arreglarla. Muchas gracias y ya comenzaremos. Thank you. We can go ahead and turn on the function.
Great. And I would also love for Councilman Torres to introduce herself if possible.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Jamie Torres, I represent Council District 3. It's an honor to be here to start this community engagement process. Thank you, Sam, for facilitating. Just really excited to hear what community has to say about our future maps. I know there's a lot of change on the horizon for our districts, and I'm just really excited to get some feedback. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, so without further ado, just thank you all so much for participating. I hope you can see how important this process is. By the engagement of the council members, this is a really critical process for the future of the city. Just to give a high-level overview of the technology, and on Zoom, if you could just make sure that you are on mute unless you would like to participate in a discussion. We will be working through an agenda with a presentation, and there is an opportunity to have an open discussion later in the meeting. So that's why we've enabled everyone to be able to unmute themselves if they would like. We will also be using a polling software called Mentimeter, where we will be asking you to complete a few questions using your phones. So if you could make sure that you have access to your phones, if possible, that would be wonderful. And then finally, we'll be also using a tool with a link that we'll provide to gather your input on the proposed maps, and that tool is called Miro. So you'll be able to access that through a link. And we'll describe a little bit more in detail about those tools later in the meeting when we get to that point. If you could go to the next slide, Sid. So just a little bit on the meeting purpose. As you know, we are here to offer our input on the proposed district maps. So for each map, we're going to be giving some thought to what you do like, what you would change, and then importantly, why you would make that change. Comparatively, we'll also be looking at the proposed maps and thinking together about what drives you to favor one map or over the other, and then what concerns do you have, if any. The ultimate goal here is to provide council with a range of community input and preferences, because they will be making the final decision at the end of March. If you could go to the next slide. Just to walk through our agenda here, there will be a short presentation here to just talk through what redistricting is, why it's important, some key points. And then because we're virtual, we won't be going into an open house, but we will be using the software Miro to provide individual feedback on the maps that are going to be presented tonight. Then we will have the opportunity to have a full group discussion to share and compare and contrast our feedback on the maps. And then finally, we'll close out the meeting with cell phone polling to indicate your preferences and really give some strong statistical data to council members so that they can understand where people stand. Next slide, please. I know that everyone is going to be just wonderful, but just to set up some basic meeting guidelines and norms. Tonight, just to make sure that you participate with as much courtesy and respect for alternate viewpoints and for each other as possible. This, as I mentioned, this input is really critical. So providing as much productive and content-specific ideas and feedback as you can. This will really help the decision-making process. Related to that, just staying on task and making sure we are here to talk about the redistricting process and provide feedback on the proposed maps. So I will try to redirect any conversation that swerves away from this topic. So actively listen. So try to listen to each other for things that you may not have heard or might not have thought of before. And refrain from interrupting each other or the presenter. And then finally, if you can help us stay on agenda, we are set to go until 7:30. So we will try to get you out at that time. Anything else to add from any council members or any participants in terms of the meeting guidelines, anything that you would like to see? Okay, let's move on. So getting into the meat of it, what is redistricting? So at a basic level, redistricting is the process of drawing the boundaries around districts in which public officials are elected. So effective redistricting accurately reflects population changes and diversity and allows for equitable and fair representation. Every 10 years after new US Census data is released, local governments must update their district boundaries to reflect the updated population numbers. For Denver, these new district maps will be in effect for the April 2023 election and will be applicable for the next 3 municipal cycles. So this is significant to note because this has not been the case before, where these boundaries will be in effect for 3 municipal cycles. So there are several rules that council and therefore we must follow in order for the redistricting process to as much an extent as possible. So the first is that Denver must be divided into 11 districts, so no fewer and no more than 11. The second is that each district should have a relatively equal population. So the population goal for each district this round is approximately 65,000 people per district. Third, lines should be drawn to encourage geographic compactness rather than being dispersed. Fourth, the districts must be geographically contiguous, meaning that each council district should share a common border with the next. And then last, districts should be comprised of whole election precincts. Next slide. So why is redistricting important? So I can't overstate how critical it is that these new districts will be boundaries for the next 3 municipal elections. So when thinking about why you prefer certain maps over others, it's really important to be thinking long-term. Redistricting at every level is critical because as populations grow, they often do not do so equally. Some grow faster or differently than others. So reconfiguring district lines to make sure that they align with population changes is important so that communities have equal access to representation. Redistricting dictates who will be elected and how those officials will advocate for their community and respond to their community's needs. And then we'll be talking more about communities of interest, but again, these districts should ideally represent any concentrated populations where there are common social and economic interests that should be included in a single district for effective and fair representation. So just to get a little bit into how Denver has changed. So the next slides will show how the population has shifted over the last 10 years. As you can see, go back to that slide. As you can see in the legend, some districts have drastically grown in population size. District 8 has grown by nearly 21 100,000 people. Other districts have seen a comparatively lower growth rate. So District 3, for example, has grown by about 900 people. Next slide, thank you. This slide shows the population change. So which districts have seen stable growth, which have had a slight gain, which have had a moderate gain, and which have had a major gain. So it's a little bit small, but just to summarize, districts 2 and 3 have seen gains of fewer than 1,800 people. Districts 5, 6, and 7 have seen gains between 1,801 and 8,000. Districts 1, 4, and 10 have seen gains between 8,001 and 13,000. And districts 8, 9, and 11 have seen gains of more than 13,000. Next slide, please. It's also critically important to consider the racial group plurality. So redistricting impacts how diverse communities are represented in their legislative bodies. For example, redistricting can ensure that communities of color have a fair opportunity to elect candidates who represent their interests and will advocate for them. Next slide. So over the last 70 years, Denver's districts have shifted drastically. So just the next couple slides are going to move from the 1950s to today and just give a synopsis of what the population has looked like and therefore what the districts have looked like. So in 1950, Denver's population was around 416,000, and there were only 9 districts at this time. In 1960, next slide, the population grew, so the number of people in each council district grew. In 1970, Denver added 2 districts to get to the 11 that we have now. And as you can see, the population has continued to grow. Next slide. In 1980, the population decreased a bit, so the number of people in each council district also decreased. In 1990, the population decreased again by about 25,000 people. In 2000, the population increased significantly, so the proportionate number of people in each district also increased. By 2010, the population was at 600,158. And then that brings us to today. What Denver's population has grown by about 20%. So we're now at 715,522. So the goal is to split that evenly. And as I mentioned before, the goal is to split each district into about 65,000 residents per district. So next slide. So just to get a little bit into what the process is, as mentioned, Denver City Council is required to redraw its council boundaries every 10 years. So a small working group of council members has convened since the fall of 2020 to draft an outreach plan and methodology for redistricting. The council chair of that council working group also met one-on-one with each council member to discuss district boundaries and resolution content. And finally, the public hearing at which the final map will be adopted is taking place on Tuesday, March 29th. So that is the critically important date. In terms of community engagement, it has occurred in 3 phases. So before the census data was released, the city collected public input through Representable, where people could identify communities of interest. So we'll discuss that term a little bit more in the next slide. During the second phase, the public was given the opportunity to review the census data. And now we are in the 3rd phase, in which community members have drawn and submitted their own maps through the Maptitude software. And council members have reviewed those maps and have also developed their own and have gone through a deliberative process to determine the maps that they would like to submit, which is what we'll be discussing tonight. If you have any concerns or questions about the maps that are presented tonight, I did just want to say that you can feel free to reach out to your council representative and they can work with you to discuss those issues or questions. So that brings us to tonight. So we'll be vetting the maps so that council can then make their final decision at the end of March. So a little bit about the term communities of interest. So One step in this public process to date was to choose the 6 maps that are presented tonight has been through the representable tool, which was created originally as an anti-gerrymandering tool in which community members were encouraged to submit areas that they considered communities of interest. And communities of interest is defined as a group of people who share common social and economic interests and would benefit from remaining in a single district. So communities of interest are often used to help identify areas where there are prominent social identities. For example, they can often be used to identify the Latinx community as one example. People were given an opportunity to map communities of interest, and this slide represents the data that was received from that. So did just also want to note that just because the map doesn't show all the communities of interest in every part of the city doesn't mean that they aren't there. It just means that the participation was limited, so no community member submitted one for that area. And as a note, the communities of interest report is on the website, so you can view the input there. Awesome. So next steps, there are 6 of these community meetings that are going to be held hopefully throughout the city once we move beyond the virtual format. After all of these meetings, we will create a report that summarizes both the quantitative and the qualitative data and input received in the meetings, and then that will inform council's decision on the final map. Next slide. Great, so we are now past the presentation part and to the fun part of the meeting in which we can provide our individual input. So there are 6 maps, and in the next 30 minutes, we'd like you to try and spend a little bit of time with each of those maps. So this will kind of be an open format style, so you will be managing your own time. I'll give you some reminders around specific, when we're coming up to the end. But how much time you spend with each map is largely up to you. We are using a platform, and I believe Sid just dropped it in the chat. It's called Miro to collect your input. So if you go to that link, I'll ask Sid if you can just briefly describe the features of the tool. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pull it up on my screen too so we can walk through it very quickly together. And Sam, can you see this currently?
Yeah, I can.
Wonderful. So it looks like a ton of people are joining. So this right here is Miro. We have all 6 maps placed on the screen. You can both zoom in and you can zoom out. The cursor will allow you to, if you click on the cursor and you see a hand, it'll allow you to drag around. You can zoom in. And as you can see here, we have each map placed associated with a letter there. So here we have an example of the current city council districts and then map A beneath it. To place a sticky note, if you look on the left side of the screen and you go down to the 4th icon, you can click on a sticky note. You can grab whatever color you'd like. You can drag and then drop over to your map. One final note on this is that in order to collect the data, it would be very helpful if you made sure that the entirety of your sticky note fell within the frame that you'd like to comment on, just so that we can easily collect this and then analyze and report on it later.
Great. Thank you so much, Sid. So just, you are all probably in there now, but what we would love for you to provide your feedback on are 3 questions for each map. So for each map, what do you like about that map? And then second, if there's anything that you would change about that map, what would that be? And then third, why is that thing that you would change important to you? I think that's a critical thing to understand, is why do people care about what they do in their districts? So as I mentioned, we're going to be taking about half an hour here for you all to provide your individual feedback through this tool. And if you do have any questions that come up as you're looking at each of the maps, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom, and we do have people here that can help answer that. So does anybody have any questions? And then I'll ask Emily to briefly describe each of the maps presented. Any questions? All right, not hearing any questions. Emily, would you mind just briefly walking through each of the maps that are here?
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my headset was telling me my battery was low. So map A is sponsored by Councilmember Sedabaca, and in her purpose statement, and also if you would like to revisit any of this information, you can find it on our public map dashboard on our redistricting website at www.denvergov.org/redistricting2022. But her purpose statement is, this map is based on a comprehensive analysis of historical maps, gerrymandering in Denver, as well as the input of residents who attended one of 3 mapping workshops in District 9 or provided feedback, maps, communities of interest, or other criteria and ideas in response to 5 publications and numerous updates and reminders via social media. Map B is sponsored by Councilmember Torres, and her purpose statement is, we asked community to help us identify their communities of interest, and several areas of town were quite clear about neighborhood unity and continuity. This map reflects key communities of interest in West Denver, keeping Barnum, Barnum West, Westwood, Athmar Park, and Valverde in one district. It also keeps 5 Points whole, provides representation of downtown, the Central Business District, and Union Station by more than one council member, connects Auraria to Lincoln Park, unifies the East Colfax neighborhood, connects College View to Loretto Heights, and keeps both Northeast Park Hill and Lowry whole. This map respects as much as possible neighborhood cohesion. However, with a reduction in 55 precincts, it was a challenge to avoid splitting all neighborhoods. Districts are compact, and deviation from the goal population is a max 4.01% and a minimum minus 2.56%, with a total range of 6.57% difference, with most districts hovering around plus 1% or minus 1% deviation. This map assumes that our city will continue to grow in population. Districts that will likely carry that growth are positioned to absorb it in an equitable manner. Map C is sponsored by Councilmember Flynn. His statement is, this map is based on communities of interest and compactness and was drawn intentionally to minimize the amount of change and swapping of areas between districts. Boundary adjustments have been made on the margins. Map D is sponsored by Council members Clark, Herndon, Cashman, Hines, Gilmore, and Black. Their statement is, the submitted map adheres to all of the rules put forth in our city charter and to the greatest extent possible to the additional criteria set forth in Council Resolution 21-1059. The largest district is 8.3% larger than the smallest, falling well within the 10% goal. Special attention was put towards preserving communities of interest based on the final report provided to Council using the 14 group community of interest areas and 154 individual communities of interest that were submitted by members of the public. Additionally, this map puts forward a plan that also preserves the constituencies traditionally represented by each district to the greatest extent possible. This map reunites several statistical neighborhoods that have in the past been split while minimizing drawing district boundaries through neighborhood boundaries whenever possible. For the neighborhood planning initiative, neighborhoods were analyzed and then grouped together carefully, considering the following elements: shared histories, issues and aspirations, built environments and natural features, planning need, character, context, development patterns, major destinations, and common infrastructure. This plan also makes several moves to put neighborhoods that are grouped in the neighborhood planning initiative together in the same council district. The sponsors of this map believe that this map represents the best scenario for creating district maps that are compact, contiguous, and abide by the allowed standard deviation. Map E.
Emily?
Yeah.
Just a quick question. There's a question in the chat. The map with multiple council sponsors is map D, correct?
Yes, D as in dog.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, I know I'm speaking a lot and these are a lot of words. So I'm also going to put this, what I'm reading, in the chat as well, so folks can refer to it as they're looking at maps.
Thank you.
Plan E is sponsored by Councilmember Sandoval. Her statement is, this map attempts to respect natural boundaries, honor communities of interest, and keep statistical neighborhoods intact to the extent possible. This map has a 6% deviation. Plan F is sponsored by Councilmember Sawyer. Her statement reads, this map was created in response to East Colfax community feedback. Community leaders in the neighborhood felt that they would like to be represented by a single council member. They have also said they feel strongly that their needs and interests, mostly around displacement and gentrification, align more with the residents of Montbello, and so they would like to become a part of District 8. There is also a community of interest identified in Southern District 5, where we have a significant population of Orthodox Jewish residents that we tried to keep together based on public feedback. As a result of these two stated communities of interest and public feedback requesting neighborhoods be kept together instead of represented by 2 council members wherever possible, Council District 5 needs to grow, most likely to the west and or north. Starting there, we adjusted boundaries of other council districts based on population growth, keeping in mind the estimated locations of council member addresses. And again, all of that language is in the link that I provided in the chat. You can find it in the tab titled Plan Narratives.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. As everyone's getting started, does anybody have any questions? And just, I saw a note in the chat, the screen sharing is the link that was sent. So hopefully you'll be able to access the link that was sent by Sid Bittman earlier in the chat. So do you mind just dropping it in there again, just that anybody can find it? And through that link, you will be able to provide your input. Any questions, or do people feel comfortable with this exercise? I see everyone's working hard already, which is great to see. And just as a note, there are quite a few council members here, but just a reminder that they won't be engaging in any policy debate or sharing their preferences on the maps tonight. So they are here to just observe and provide their technical expertise, but we want to keep this process as pure in terms of outside influences as possible.
Do we have to create an account in order to use the Miro tool?
You shouldn't have to create an account. So do you mind confirming that?
No, you don't have to create an account. You can just use the link that I just sent, and you should be able to go directly there and immediately and anonymously place a sticky note.
Okay, so we
Let
don't
us
need
know.
to.
Yeah, let us know if
Okay.
there's any issues accessing it, but it should be just an open link.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And that was a great example of just piping up with any questions. And I saw something in the chat here. Sid, do you mind just explaining how to use this tool as people are working on it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So when you click on the link, you should be taken to a screen that looks similar to this. If you select this cursor here, you'll be brought to a hand like this, which allows you to drag around and look at your favorite maps. If you look in the bottom right corner of the screen, you can press the plus button, which will zoom you in, or if you have a roller on your mouse or a wheel. When you do that, you can scroll into the map. On the top, you'll see where the current Denver City Council districts are. On the bottom, you'll see the associated map. To place a comment, if you go over to the left side of the screen and you go down to the 4th icon there, click on the sticky note, you can select the sticky note of your choice and then place it where you would like. You'll be prompted to type in whatever it is that you'd like, so any sort of comments. And once you do, click away from that and you'll be finished.
Thanks, Sid.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has any technical issues with the tool, Sid, do you mind if I just direct people to message you directly with them?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. And I did just want to address, so Councilman Torres's question around all of the submitted maps and whether there will be an opportunity for feedback on those maps. Councilman Sandoval, as the chair, would you mind just quickly stepping in with an answer for that question?
Absolutely. So what we decided at City Council is we had a public portal for public maps to be submitted, and we also had a City Council portal. As the public maps were coming in and being submitted, any council member could have sponsored one of the public maps. So these are the maps that will be moving forward in the public process for the month of February. The other maps that the public sponsored, we will not be discussing because they were not sponsored. And I'm not clear if any of the public maps were chosen to be sponsored by a council person, but there could very well be a map that was on the public portal that is here being sponsored by a council person. Hope that answers it.
Thank you. Any follow-up to that question or to that answer? Okay. Great. And I am, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I see some thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, cool. I am seeing quite a few people still on map 1, and just want to give a little bit of a time check. We will wrap up here with this exercise at 6:25, and there are 6 maps. So just manage your time as you would like, but if you want to move on, then I would maybe recommend doing so now. Another question from Councilman Ortega. Were these maps checked on whether there were any outlier precincts that were not contiguous? That's a great question. Councilwoman Sandoval, would you be able to help answer that question?
Yeah. Yes. So these maps checked on whether there were any out. All these maps have been vetted by our GIS and our technology services, and all of these maps meet the criteria set forth in charter and in our resolution. So yes, Councilman Ortega, all of these maps meet all of our criteria, and one of our criteria were that they should be contiguous. But given that we have Glendale in the middle of Denver, they can't all be contiguous.
Right, so that would be the only exception.
On
Correct.
every single map. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
Great. Any questions that are coming up around the tool or about any of the specific maps as you are looking at them?
Yeah, Sam, I have a question. Will the board be available outside of meeting hours, or like could someone come back and visit it later, or does it close after the meeting ends?
That's a great question. I think that's kind of up to the committee. We will have different boards for each of the meetings. So I think that the boards themselves, once finalized, will be available for people to see the input. I would be open to keeping the board open maybe for like 24 hours. I think that's up to you, Councilman Sandoval, as well as if you're open to keeping this feedback open for people who might not have been in the meeting?
I would say we could keep it open for 24 hours. I think that's fair and reasonable, so that people can provide feedback. I know a lot of times it takes me a moment to process things, and I want to give really thorough feedback.
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the different maps and looking at the top map and figuring out how it differs from the bottom map. For people who are more visual, they might want to actually see some lines. So it might take them a minute to provide some different type of feedback. So happy to have it open for 24 hours, and then we'll close it.
Okay. Yep.
Great.
I think that's a good strategy. So yeah, if you are actually like myself too, and Councilman Sandoval, someone who likes to process a little bit more internally and might not have the depth of answers that you would like on these questions for each of the maps right now, then yeah, feel free to take a little bit of time after the meeting to fill it out. I think that's a really great suggestion. Thank you, Emily. One question, why were community members referred to the Maptitude software to share the visions and priorities if the maps are not part of the conversation? And council members were not required to review publicly submitted maps. So I would say, I think I mentioned in my presentation that council members did go through quite an intense deliberative process around the maps, and I would refer to the council members present, but I believe that aspects of the submitted maps are likely strongly represented in the presented maps. But is there anything to add from any of the council members here?
Thank you, Sam. I will speak that I reviewed every map that was submitted, public and city council, and I certainly don't want to speak for the other council members. I would certainly assume if they're going to sponsor a map or not, they would go through each and every one of them. So for public members that did submit, I want you to know that I read and went through each and every one before deciding which map that I chose to submit. And I believe there was a total of 21 maps. Emily, correct me if that was incorrect, but for the council to vet 21 maps, we sincerely just don't have the time. And that's why as a small group, we came together and said, what would be the appropriate measure? And that's where we decided council members could say, this is the one map I want to sponsor. So we could have had up to 13 maps. And through this process, we only came to 6. But I assure you that all the maps were looked at when council members were deciding, at least for my particular instance. Thank you.
Yeah, and I wanted just to remind everyone on here that we had a very truncated time frame due to the census data being released late, the state having to go through their process, and then the clerk and recorder having to re-precinct. So we were not up and running until January. So we had a month, and in every publication and every committee meeting, I made it very clear that January 31st was the deadline to submit a map. And during that whole entire month, you could reach out to your council member and work with them, or every person has 3 council members, 1 district and 2 at large. So you have 3 different opportunities to work with a council member on a map if you would have liked that to move forward. And then one other reminder, in November, we also moved the municipal election from May. Moving forward, it will be in April. So we also lost 1 more month on this entire process because we have to have this map adopted by March, the end of March, so that it is prepared and adopted by April. You have to live in a council district for a year in order to run. And I felt that was very important. The small working group felt that was a very important factor.
Thank you, Councilman Sandoval. And yes, I'm seeing sort of similar frustrations voiced. And I think just wanted to reiterate that this meeting, there will be 6 of these meetings as well, sort of throughout the city, hopefully moving away from virtual over the next month. And these meetings are a really important feedback mechanism for community members to share what they do and don't like about each of the maps submitted. And then that will be really the most critical input factor for council members as they make their decisions at the end of March. So this is a critically important process, and I just want to reiterate appreciation for everyone who is engaged. And I know that this is, on a Wednesday night, maybe not your preferred social gathering, but I just think it's really important that everyone is so engaged. So thank you for being here. Any other questions around any of the maps specifically as you're looking at the maps that are proposed?
I think it would be helpful to clarify the deadline on which a council member can sponsor a map.
Great. Councilman Sandoval, is that something you can help with?
Yep, the deadline for a council member to sponsor a map was February 1st, and they could have changed it and actually gotten into till today. And once again, the time frame, we're dealing with a very truncated time frame, meaning a really short time frame. And so council members could have heard from the community. To everyone's point, you could have reached out to your council member through the whole entire month of January and worked with the council member to submit a map, or to go and ask your council member to sponsor a map moving forward. So I know I was looking at the website every day, looking at community maps. I know I was looking at our report on communities of interest. And I know that I was meeting with my registered neighborhood organizations and having this conversation since last summer when we started the representable.org process. So the time frame for a council member these are all council sponsored maps, and we had to get those in to Emily and identify which maps February 1st. And what was challenging about we knew this was going to be the crunch time, is we had to make sure that all of these maps met the criteria set forth in our charter and in our resolution, such as, for example, the deviation, compactness, and other factors that we have to take into consideration.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. I just thought it was important for the public to hear about what that deadline was, because the earlier presentation sort of inferred that a community could still work with a council person to sponsor a community map. So that's why I wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I hope that my comment around contacting your council members was interpreted as you may reach out to them with any questions around the maps or anything that arises for you when looking at the 6 proposed maps. So thank you so much for that clarification. And just to give a heads up, we will be wrapping up this Miro exercise as a group in 6 minutes. So by 6:25, I would love to reconvene as a full group to have a discussion. And the question in the chat around, will these be the maps presented at every community meeting, or will there be adjustments throughout the month based on ongoing feedback? I believe in order to maintain continuity in the data that we present to council, we will be presenting the same maps in each meeting, but there will be in the comprehensive report a full outline of what the feedback was for each of the meetings, as well as themes across all of the 6 meetings. And just to clarify, these are the 6 sponsored maps. So they're the maps that council will be deliberating about. Just to address this last question in the chat, sort of talking about how and if there will be potential adjustments to the maps. how will that be possible, or can plan sponsors have another chance to shift any of the content of the maps? Councilman Sandoval, do you mind helping out with that question?
I can. Well, it's
Perfect. Thank you, Councilman Herndon.
yes. I'm sorry. I keep hitting my delay. My video goes on and off. I guess it's difficult to answer that question when you don't know what the feedback is. But the reason why we wanted to have the deadline of February 1st, so that for each of these meetings, the communities are all seeing the same maps over the period of time. Now, let's say, for example, there's just everyone loves map X. If you could change one thing, and that's the consistent thing that we hear, well, then the council as a whole, we can ask that as a body if that's something we would like to do. But right now we want to just say, these were the maps that were sponsored. This is the feedback after our multiple meetings. We'll collect all that, and then as a body, we'll decide how to move forward. So I apologize for not being too specific, but it's really hard to answer until we get this feedback about each of the maps. And Chair Sandoval, let me know if please say if there's anything I said incorrectly.
No, that's perfect. Summed it up great.
Great. Thank you both. Okay, we will be wrapping up in about 3 minutes. So if there's any map that you haven't gotten a chance to look at and you want to be able to at least be able to look at and have some thoughts on, please feel free to navigate throughout the Muro in the next couple of minutes. Thank you, Councilman Cashman, for coming. Hope you have a good meeting. Okay, if you can start wrapping up your final thought here, the sticky that you're working on as the last sticky for tonight. And as mentioned earlier, we can keep this Miro board open for 24 hours after this meeting. So if anything comes to you in the middle of the night, as things do, feel free to revisit the link. Great. So if Sid, you could go to the next slide. I would love to have just sort of an open discussion here to compare and contrast the maps. So just to preface, I understand that there's some feedback on sort of the broader process here, but would love to focus in, since we only have about 15 minutes here for discussion, to focus in on the maps that are presented, the 6 maps. So the questions that I would love to give to have you all give some thought to are what are the absolute musts for you in thinking about district boundaries? What must you have when thinking about district boundaries or your district specifically? And then second, what concerns you about your least favorite map? So when you were looking at the maps, was there one that stuck out, and was there something that was particularly worrisome for you, that you think that the group would benefit from discussion about. And then finally, what factors are driving your decision to favor one map over the other? So what's important to you? That's kind of getting to the heart of the matter. So just want to open it up for discussion here. Since there are about 67 people, quite a large meeting, which is amazing. If you could use the raise hand function if you have a comment so that we can keep track of the queue, that would be really helpful. So who all has any thoughts here?
And if you want to raise your hand, you can go to reactions, and in the reactions button, there's a raise your hand feature, and it makes it, that's what we do in committee, and it makes it super efficient.
Thank you. I did not realize that there wasn't the raise hand, and I appreciate that explanation. Thank you. Any thoughts on any of these questions? If anybody's having any issue, oh yes, Shannon Hoffman.
Well, I'll just also speak, so maybe it'll encourage others to speak. I have a question. Will there be an opportunity for public comment on these maps or the maps that we narrow to beyond these 6 meetings? So I assume during the month of March, council will be narrowing toward a final map. And so will there continue to be opportunity for comment?
So there will be 6 meetings throughout this month and then the first month of March, I believe, sort of similar in format, actually the same in format across the community. And throughout those meetings, we'll be collecting sort of the same types of data so that we have that to present to council. And then that will be summarized in a report that will then inform council's decision on March 29th. Does that answer your question?
So after these 6 meetings and during the month of March, there won't be an opportunity for comment. This is the only time that there's opportunity for comment.
There's always an opportunity for comment. You can email dencc@denvergov.org. You can call 3 council members. Each person in Denver has 3 council members, and we have public comment on Monday night. And so you can always speak to something on Monday night as long as there's not a hearing on the agenda for that particular issue. So there's multiple ways to be able to still provide feedback.
Okay, thank you. It's overwhelming for my brain to take in all of the maps that we just saw. So thanks.
Yep, and we've been just discussing, Emily Lapel from Central Staff and myself have been working on this since, to be honest with all of you, since March of 2020. And so we will post these maps on the website, redistricting website. We had a really tight time crunch from Monday until Wednesday. So we'll get these posted on our website, and then you'll be able to also, if you would feel more comfortable, to email feedback to the email web address that we have dedicated for redistricting.
Perfect. Thank you. Roger Cobb.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to chime in. Thank you, council, for being here. We have a very unique situation here in District 8, in that we have 3 nest neighborhoods that are contiguous, all fit the COI, if you will. And when we think about displacement and just the growth of Denver, if you will, here's an opportunity for folks to band together to elect another council member that will really take our interests forward, if you will. Maptitude does just that. It includes East Colfax, which is one of our nest neighborhoods, along with Montbello and Northeast Park Hill. Looking at all the maps that I've seen so far, it's very unfortunate that not Northeast Park Hill, but Montbello will be split based on the precincts that we have to keep intact. And so once again, I just hope council will consider keeping these 3 nest neighborhoods together for a unified voice. Thank you.
Thank you. That's exactly the type of input we're hoping for is what's important to you and why in this process. Thank you so much for modeling that, Roger. What else?
Well, I would second the sentiment as an East Colfax resident. I really do not feel like District 5 represents the majority of interest for the East Colfax community. I would really like to see us grouped with the communities north and surrounding. So I'll also just make a comment that I understand the map required that we create a full map for the city of Denver. But I will admit to feeling a bit out of touch with the rest of the communities in Denver. So I focus primarily on the northeast grouping of neighborhoods, even though I was required to create a full map. So, and thank you for your work.
Great, thank you so much. John.
Hey, I just want to reiterate the sentiment. Thank you all for being here. So it seems like the only real hard date is the date that council has to vote on a map. Based on what we just heard, is there any chance that new maps could be submitted after everyone gets around and discusses things they like and don't like? Or is really, is it really hard set in stone? We must use the maps that have been submitted before all this discussion can occur.
I can take that one, Sam.
Thank you.
I'm going to have Councilman Herndon help me if I don't answer it correctly, because sometimes I'm in such the weeds on this that I think I say it in plain English and sometimes I don't. So what we're doing is we asked each council member, we had the ability to have 13 maps being sponsored, and then we wanted to gain feedback. So there's no set in stone map here. So as we are hearing feedback from certain things, there could be tweaks throughout the process, not in the month of February, but at the very beginning time of March, when we have the whole entire ability to go. We wanted to hit up as many places citywide, but COVID, didn't allow us to do that. So we will, if tweaks are needed, to provide feedback and to respond to the community input. I know that we are on the Maptitude side. It's still open for those types of tweaks moving forward based on community input, and community input is really important. That's why we have 6 meetings. Hope that answered.
And it does. And I would just add to that, John, when you recognize that any tweak you make makes an impact on the entire map. Typically. So that's why we have to be, you could very well, when we get the comments, like as council right now, we're just taking all the feedback. When we get this presentation and we're sitting as a body, a council sponsor could say, hey, John, thank you for that feedback on my map, but this is why I was unable to do whatever X, Y, Z. So we'll be able to articulate back then. And then as a council, we can say, okay, is it worth making that adjustment? Or do we possibly see the challenges of making that and move forward? But I think I look forward to seeing the feedback, and then we'll, as a council, can be able to weigh in back and forth.
And Councilman Hines, did you have something to add too?
Yeah, I wanted to synthesize a couple of things that Councilmember Herndon and Sandoval both said. I also looked at every map when I was considering the map that I wanted to sponsor, including the citizen, the community submitted maps. I also want to say that while I did put my name on one map and happened to be shared with some other colleagues, I'm not wedded to that map. It's not, I'm going to burn down the whole city if the map isn't exactly as drawn. So this, hopefully I would never do that anyway, but really the idea here is to get the community something that I thought was worthy of community input, and get the community input. So I don't want anyone to think that just because I put my name on a map that I'm dead level set on that map. It was really just, I think this is a good starting point for the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And just to address just a chat question around the format of the in-person meetings, which I think is a great question. We're trying to replicate as much as we can the online and in-person meetings. So we'll actually have the maps sort of situated around the room. There will be large printed out maps the ones that you reviewed tonight. And people will have physical sticky notes. I love in-person meetings to stick their comments, the same ones that you all gave virtually on the maps provided. So thank you for that question. Yeah, Megan.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. I live in Councilperson Hines' district. I'm kind of on the border of a number of these maps, and my just reflection on this is that living in and near Capitol Hill, we have really a specific set of opportunities and challenges. It's a place I love and I want to be, but I feel like that is my community of interest, and seeing some of these maps sort of slice and dice up Capitol Hill is concerning to me. I would like my council person to have the focus in our area and our needs. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Katie.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. I just want to echo what Megan just said. I also live in Cap Hill, and I was pretty concerned when I think I saw maps D and E split off kind of the bottom part of Cap Hill. And it just doesn't quite make sense to me. As she said, we have a lot of really unique challenges in our neighborhood. And I'm afraid that having it split up will mean maybe those 2 blocks don't get the attention they deserve for that specific type of issue. I think the neighborhood would be better served, or my community in general, by keeping us together. But thank you all for the work you put into this.
Great, that's really helpful. Good to hear. Thank you. Any other last thoughts? In a couple minutes, we're gonna move into a polling exercise. So just a couple last comments here. Molly.
Hi, I am Molly Dorner. I am a member of the Tech Services GIS team, and I helped work on getting some of the mapping to the final stage after Kathy left. I don't know if this has fully been articulated, but I just wanted to jump in and offer a little bit of insight about the number of constraints and requirements on the maps. They have to follow the election precincts. They have to maintain all of the balance in population. And so I just want everyone to keep that in mind as we move forward, that there are quite a lot of geographic constraints on the way these maps are constructed. And looking over them from the perspective of someone who looks at maps all day, I know that this was quite a challenging task. So it's not going to be easy to choose one map moving forward.
That's really helpful perspective to offer, Molly. Thank you. Yeah, and I sort of ran through it in the presentation, but yeah, there are a number of sort of constraints for this redistricting process. And so as Councilman Herndon mentioned, while changes sort of can be made, it's that ripple effect of how one change might affect the rest of the requirements for this process. So that's a great point. Any other last thoughts before we move into polling and then finish up the meeting? Great. Well, thank you all so much for jumping in. I know virtual isn't desired, but I really appreciate you stepping in and providing your input through this format. So Sid, do you mind pulling the slides back up? Great. So in the last few minutes, so we end here at 7, we wanted to ask you to provide your quantitative input on the maps through a polling exercise. And we have just 3 questions for you. So it's not a long, extensive survey or anything like that. But Sid, do you mind just briefly describing the polling software Mentimeter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go to the next slide here so we can see. It's going to be simple. If you can please go to www.menti, it's menti.com. You'll be prompted to enter a code. The code is 20240852, and I can enter that in the chat as well. When you do that, you'll be prompted to answer a series of questions. I think Sam will give a countdown as to how much time is left before going on to the next question. The questions, when you look at them, will be translated into Spanish, and you will be able to provide the quantitative data. And as you can see here already, this will be populated in real time. So every time somebody adds information there, you can see it come up on the screen.
Great. Yep. And we're going to spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes until it feels like we've got through the majority of input here. On this first slide, maybe a little bit longer, just so that people can get a feel for the software. And here the question, you can also identify your neighborhood by any landmarks that are near you that you think are critical, your neighborhood, of course, or cross streets.
And I'm actually going to pull it up on a separate slide here because it looks like the technology is going slower, so more people are actually presenting information. Can you see this now better, Sam?
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Sid. Is anybody having any challenges with the software, or does everything seem like it's going smoothly? Looks like people are getting it. Get a couple thumbs up. Awesome. The code again, Sid, do you mind just verbally saying what the code is?
Yes, absolutely. Let me make sure that I have it here, that I'm saying it correctly. It's 20240852, and I'll put it in the chat one more time.
Thank you. It's great. And as you can see, we are getting quite a bit of response. So it looks like 20 people have provided answers so far. Since we have about 60, I'll give everybody maybe one other minute to provide their answer here. Great. It looks like we have a pretty broad representation of communities in this meeting too, which is great. Okay, I'm going to give everybody about 30 more seconds to fill out this question, and then we'll move on. Okay, looks like we've kind of gotten a lull here in terms of response rates. So Sid, can we move on to the next question? Great. So this is a question to help council sort of understand quantitatively where people's preferences lie, where the maps are. So I'm wondering if you all have your Miro open still. If you can go to that slide, you'll be able to view the maps and share your preferences. But I'll give a little bit more time here to provide input. So here, the software allows you to rank the maps that were presented in order of your preference. So obviously, first is your top priority map. That's your preferred map, all the way down to your least preferred map that was presented. And thanks for Sid just dropped the Miro link in the chat again so that you can go to that and be able to see all of the map options. Great. It looks like 5 people so far. So I'm going to give us a couple more minutes so that we can try to get up to similar number as the first question, around 30.
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
While people are taking this part, can you, before we end, can you, even though we have a virtual meeting next week, the same format, can we talk about what the in-person format would be? Will we have this type of technology? Can you just touch on that so people, as people are telling their communities where to go, I think everyone's going to say, oh, this was great technology on the visual. So can we set expectations for in-person?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned before that in terms of feedback on the individual maps, we tried to replicate that as much as possible in the in-person meetings by literally just lying out the maps on the walls, and there will be pens and big stickies for you to give your feedback on each of the maps like you did tonight using Miro. Then we'll reconvene into a full group discussion like we did tonight. And then we will use the same exact software in the in-person meetings, because in-person, we will just have the link and people will be able to use their phones, and we'll have the screen shared on PowerPoint in front of everybody. And so similarly, you'll be able to see this live feedback sort of play out using this polling software. But does anybody have any additional questions about the in-person meetings or any of those, that format or anything that's coming up?
Just, I have a quick question on this technology.
Yeah.
And whether or not it accounts for duplication. So can somebody vote more than once and change the outcome of how these maps look? Not the maps, but this data on the screen in front of us.
Yeah, that's a great question. Will you let us just take a second to do a little bit of research on that, and then we can get back to you on that question?
That would be helpful to know. So thank you. And then it'd be helpful to know like how we're going to compile and utilize the data from these these public meetings to help shape and form how council is going to move forward.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then there's a question in the chat around comfort of using this technology. And I think that's a great question. If you don't feel comfortable using this technology, Emily, is it appropriate to ask if people can email their top 6 preferences to the Redistricting 2022 email?
Yes, people can email. If they don't feel comfortable emailing, they're always welcome to call our front desk, 720-337-2000, or their individual council members. But the Redistricting 2022 at denvergov.org is the best email to reach us at, but you're also welcome to email your individual council members as well.
Awesome. Okay, great. It looks like we're at about 28. I'm going to give people maybe 30 more seconds to provide their responses. And yes, so in the chat, the question around Spanish translation. So the software, while it doesn't show on the slide, on your phones, you are able to see the translation of the questions on your phones.
Not just the questions, but the the outcome of the data. Is that showing up for the folks who are on the Spanish translation? Are they seeing this same data translated in Spanish?
I believe so, but I can just summarize the data here as we're going. So if B, you're here translating, The first here is map D, that's the top priority. Second preference is map E. Third is map A. Fourth is map B. Fifth is map F. And sixth is map C. And just to answer the previous question around duplication of responses, it looks like we have an answer and participants can only submit one answer. So that provides the answer for that. Okay, and last question. So here, while it's a little bit small on the slide, the question is, what is important for you in considering district boundaries? And this is a multiple choice question. So the first answer is not separating my neighborhood, not separating school boundaries, connection to a current council representative, maintaining community diversity, and maintaining clear defined borders such as interstates, rivers. And then if there's an other, feel free to drop that as well. Great. Seeing a lot of alignment around the option of not separating my neighborhood, and then quite a few around maintaining community diversity, and some around other. And we don't know what that answer is yet, but we will have that report out with what the other is. And then quite a few around connection to current council representatives. And it looks like we've got about 30 responses. So I believe we have, I'll give people maybe 30 more seconds if they haven't responded yet. And I think 31 was our cap. So that wraps up the polling, and thank you so much for participating in that. As mentioned before, if you did not participate or were not comfortable participating through this format, please feel free to email the redistricting email or give a call to the front desk. And yes, a couple questions that we will get responses to in the future. All right. Well, any thoughts around this exercise and what you saw from everyone's responses before we wrap up? Anything that surprised you or anything that sort of stuck out to you in that exercise? Okay, well, great. So with 6 minutes left, I just wanted to thank you all so much again for engaging really openly in this process. And I'm sure the council members here will agree that we truly can't overstate how important this input is and will be in helping them make their final decision. So again, the public hearing is on March 29th, and feel free to send any questions in the meantime to Emily at redistricting2022@denvergov.org. And there is that. Any last thoughts from any council members present?
I would just say thank you, Sam and everyone else. This was great with the polling and the live time feedback. Thank you, Sid, for incorporating all of our suggestions and thoroughly preparing for this. And for the public hearing, I know most people know City Council meets on Monday, but Cesar Chavez Day is Monday, March 28th. So our council meeting will actually be on a Tuesday, and it will be Tuesday, March 29th. And whenever we have a public holiday on a Monday, we move our city council meeting to Tuesday. So President's Day, it comes on Tuesday. So Tuesday, March 29th. And we look forward to seeing you in the next coming meetings. The first meeting in person is at Lake Middle School on Wednesday, February 16th at 5:30 in their cafeteria. And then other than that, we have another virtual meeting next week.
I'd like to add just a brief comment. I appreciate all the work that's gone into creating this opportunity for people to participate virtually. It does feel a little fast. Excuse me. So I do appreciate that the site will be open for people who take a little bit of time to process so that they'll be able to weigh in. What I wasn't clear about, and I didn't hear an answer on whether or not people's comments will be on there for the next 24 hours while they're logging on and looking at that. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, Sid, can you help clarify that answer?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So the comments will be there as long as we keep the activity open for everyone to provide information on.
Okay, and then are we compiling that so that from one meeting to the next, we are at least capturing all of that input somewhere so that as council goes through their deliberation and tries to figure out which map becomes the final map, we take into account the public input that we're getting?
Yeah, so I think from meeting to meeting, my plan, and feel free to suggest something different, but my plan was to sort of provide everyone with equal sort of clean slate-ness in terms of their input provided on each map. I'm happy to sort of verbally sum up some of the input that was given at the previous meeting and sort of some of the themes that we're seeing arising in some of the input. But I think the hope is that people sort of have the same conditions at each meeting so that they can provide equal input.
I think that's important for the public that are getting a chance to see the maps and be able to weigh in on them with, as you're saying, clean maps without the comments. However, for members of council who will not be attending every one of the meetings and being able to capture the input that comes out of each of those meetings, I think will be helpful to us in our deliberations about which map. Some of us have not taken a position to support a particular map and want to wait to see what all of that feedback is that we're getting. I think to presume that any one map is sort of at the front of the line before everybody's weighed in feels a little disingenuous to the process. So I think it's important that people know that we're really listening to that input.
So Councilwoman Ortega, Sam and her team will be presenting every Monday. So this coming Monday at the redistricting meeting, they'll give a summation of what happened at this meeting. The following week, we have redistricting. I made a mistake. The first in-person meeting is actually Saturday, February 12th at 10:30 at Cook Park. So for those of you who are out south, please tell all of your neighbors to Cook Park. And then that following Wednesday is Lake Middle School. So Sam and her team are coming every Monday to the redistricting to give summations. And then what's nice about that is if you missed a meeting and you weren't able to go there, the public can watch the Channel 8, and we also will get briefed on it and can ask questions on that. So Sam and her team will be there every Monday. And for the public, we host a redistricting meeting, a committee of the whole, all council members, Monday at 1:30. And you can either watch on Channel 8 if you have Comcast, you can watch online, or you can watch via Zoom. So there's numerous ways and opportunities to tune in. And I believe Valentine's Day, February 14th, will be our first in-person meeting down at the chambers. So that one would be, we will be downtown, and then it will still be broadcast on Channel 8.
Thank you.
Sam, the one thing I would just like to add, there was a comment about numbering of districts, and I would encourage the community, if that's something that of concern you, write that in your comments. So once again, you're looking at everything on these maps from size, et cetera. And if you look and wonder why are they numbered particularly, please say that. I will tell you a decade ago, and Emily wrote this in the comments, that topic came up and there was not a desire from council as well as community members to change that. But if that has changed, then I would encourage community members to write those in their comments when they write their thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Any last thoughts before we wrap up? We are 7 p.m. on the dot. If not, then just thank you all again so much for your engagement. And I look forward to seeing how this all plays out. And yeah, really appreciate your participation in such an important process. So I hope you all have a great night, and I'll see you soon.